Let me take us back, though, to August 16th, 2022, the day that President Biden signed the Inflation Reduction Act into law. That same day, the Los Angeles Business Council, under Mayor Leslie's wisdom and leadership, issued a statement. Not only did the Business Council express support for the IRA, you said something else, and I say you, all of you. You declared that the Inflation Reduction Act gave us an opportunity to, quote, prove once and for all that environmental stewardship and economic growth are inextricably linked, end quote. Think about that. That's a pretty powerful statement. For those of you who are part of national associations or trade groups, not everybody across the country that does what you do necessarily thinks that way. Certainly 10 years ago, that wasn't the case. But the LA Business Council gets it. You know, for the years, those of us who have tried to advocate for action on climate goals have been met with a lot of resistance, sometimes from climate deniers. Again, California's Exhibit A, it's happening now. Other times from colleagues in business who wonder what bold climate steps, this is too radical of a change, too quickly, what's it going to mean for the bottom line? Because at the end of the day, we have a fiduciary responsibility. That sound familiar? What we've been saying, not just with the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act, but with the implementation of the Inflation Reduction Act, what the LA Business Council summarized so well is that we don't have to choose between progress and profit. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Climate action is actually good for business and the economy. It's why at the same time, over 40 large companies like Ford, IKEA, BP America, Shell, and others wrote to Congress urging us to pass the Inflation Reduction Act. As they said then, it's because the Inflation Reduction Act will, I'll quote from their letter now, quote, will unleash American innovation and ingenuity and foster the creation of millions of jobs as a result, end quote. So I get to be with all of you here today and take this opportunity to share why this monumental legislation has led to monumental opportunities. If you put the Inflation Reduction Act together with the infrastructure law, which was bipartisan, and I'm happy about that, we're proving that it's not only good policy from a climate standpoint, it is good policy from a business and economic standpoint. You know, when we tackle climate, the first question we ask, right, this is the engineer in me, well, what are the biggest sources of emissions and pollution that we need to tackle? First one, everybody knows, is transportation. So we have to begin with transportation. The question we begin to ask ourselves next is, how can we make zero emission options more economical? How does it pencil? Not just for consumers, but for industry. Well, we've heard a lot about electric vehicles, and I'll talk about that in a second, but how do we get into fleets and heavy duty and beyond? That's where I'm going. So from a consumer standpoint, over 2 years, the Inflation Reduction Act's electric vehicle tax credit has made it more affordable option for 250,000 of Americans. So taken together, their savings with these electric vehicles is about $1.5 billion. Put those credits on the purchasing side together with the investments we've made in charging and fueling infrastructure from the bipartisan infrastructure law, which includes over $300 million coming to California, it's making EV ownership easier and a better option for working families. But as I mentioned, it's not just about electric vehicles. That's important, but there's a lot more to do. We're also electrifying school buses and public transit and offering a first ever commercial clean vehicle tax credit to the tune of $40,000. What else are we working on? That sounds like a lot. Just last week, I was with Governor Newsom. We went to the Port of Oakland celebrating a new form of clean energy with the exciting potential to decarbonize our transportation industry. I'm talking about hydrogen power. And while the announcement was in the Port of Oakland, it's really for a statewide hydrogen hub. The bipartisan infrastructure law established a hydrogen hub here in California with an initial $1 billion investment to develop and to scale up clean hydrogen. This technology will help us decarbonize some of the hardest to reach sectors like heavy-duty freight and potentially locomotives. So as we continue to develop this promising technology, in the near term, we're making significant progress in other areas as well. In July, just a couple months ago, on a warm day, kind of like today, I joined the EPA and the South Coast Air Quality Management District to announce a $500 million coming to reduce emissions in Southern California by replacing dirty diesel trucks and outdated freight equipment with zero emissions infrastructure. Hi, Marta. And thanks to the bipartisan infrastructure law, again, additional funding that we've secured, we're also bringing $300 million in transportation infrastructure projects for the region in advance of the 2028 Olympic Games. So for those who've been part of the movement, you know that while we point to the Olympics, this is not just for the Olympics. All these projects are permanent infrastructure, and the people of the region will benefit before the Olympics, during the Olympics, and long after the Olympics. We're going to continue to see progress from LA Metro's Purple Line extension to the East San Fernando Valley Light Rail Transit Project. Actually, I just came from an announcement with LA Metro and the U.S. Department of Transportation announcing another $900 million in federal funding for that project in the San Fernando Valley. Long time coming. I'll take it. So I know I'm throwing a lot of facts and figures out at you, but it's to make a point. It's quite a time to advance this vision, this agenda that we've had for many, many years. But as we are working to make these long-term and historic investments and reduce emissions, improve public health, create more quality, good-paying jobs, improve transportation options, and bringing more business to the region, this is our rising tide. This is our moment. And in a state as big as ours, right, California, you all know this, the 5th largest economy in the world, soon to be the 4th largest economy in the world, we know that California needs to explore every option to diversify our energy portfolio and increase reliability. Another false choice. We don't have to focus on reliability or diversity. We can and need to do both. And today, California has been a trailblazer in this space as well. In the clean energy transition, thanks to the ambitious goals that California has laid out, ambitious but achievable. One area where California has enormous potential to continue to push the envelope is in both wind and solar energy. You may be thinking, that's nothing new. Let me tell you what is new. Back in the fall of 2022, I welcomed the Biden-Harris administration's announcement of the very first offshore wind energy lease sale on the West Coast. I'll take applause every chance I get. The sale represented the potential for 1.5 gigawatts of a clean energy, enough to power 1.5 million homes while creating thousands of jobs in the process. Now, earlier this year, we announced over $400 million for offshore wind infrastructure in Northern California, thanks to the bipartisan infrastructure law. So with the help of the administration, we're both facilitating the sale of offshore leases and incentivizing even more investments by making it easier for companies to assemble and transport wind turbines here in California. So just like we've done with electric vehicles, we're lowering the cost of entry for companies to be involved in this space. Now, when it comes to solar power production and energy storage, California, again, has been a leader because we've answered that question. What if the sun's not shining? What good is solar? Well, storage has to be an important complement. We have benefited in California by the amount of solar we put out there, coupling it with storage to address the intermittent issues. But the truth is that to date, for all of our success, it's only been wealthier communities and higher income families that have benefited from this. The challenge is, how do we make it more broad and more affordable, more accessible to medium and lower income families? To get the environmental benefits, we really got to scale it up for everybody's participation. So as we work to implement the Inflation Reduction Act funding, I'm continuing to fight for the inclusion of multifamily housing in solar investments. And not if, but when we do that, we'll slash energy costs for low-income communities while continuing to create more of those good-paying jobs and help stabilize our grid. So we're not just reducing carbon emissions, we're not just creating jobs and cutting energy costs, we're diversifying our energy portfolio and increasing the reliability of our grid in the process. And it's in the spirit of that one that I'll brag about one of the very first bills that I introduced in the Senate. It became known as the Power On Act. And at the risk of going over my time, I just gotta tell you the story behind it. I was sitting in the Senate one day, a couple months literally into this new job. And do you remember the ice storms that took out the grid in Texas a couple of years ago? So I went over to the one senator from Texas that I can work with, Senator Cornyn, in case you're wondering. And I said, John, I see what's happening in Texas. I'm not here to give you a hard time because I represent California. And it's only a matter of time before wildfires are raging and our grid is under threat. There's got to be something that we can do together, that we can do on a bipartisan basis to tackle the threats to our grid and improve our grid reliability. So we had the audacity to suggest, well, let's invest $1 billion, work with states and utilities to upgrade the grid. As long as you don't call it climate change because we're reducing emissions, then I'm with you. Deal, let's just get the language right. So we started pitching our colleagues. The good news is they loved the idea so much, it got woven into the bipartisan infrastructure law, but they had an issue with the $1 billion ask. That should give us $5 billion. And so it got signed into law by virtue of being part of the bipartisan infrastructure law. And as we're modernizing the grid throughout the country, we're working, it's going to have the effect of preventing blackouts and shutoffs by investing in more resilient transmission lines and other elements of our grid infrastructure. And because of all that, again, we're just hitting all of our goals, including increasing reliability of the grid while we're incorporating all these renewable energy projects. Which brings me to my final point. I was listening to the previous panel from backstage when they were talking about permitting reform. Right, if we're going to advance these projects and advance them more quickly to achieve all the goals that I've spoken of, we have to be able to approve them and build them out in the near term. And so we're not going to do that without some common sense permitting reform. We're still negotiating, we're still navigating through Congress, but I can tell you as a newer member of the Energy and Natural Resources Committee, we did vote out on a bipartisan basis such a reform package just last month and a half ago in the Senate. So we'll be pushing for action on the Senate floor and hopefully by the House before the end of this year to, again, accelerate our goals in all these projects. So that's what's at stake. That's my report of what I've been up to contribute to the LA Business Council's sustainability objectives. We've done a lot. We have a lot more work to do, but we've come a long way in the last couple of years. And I know that if we continue to work together, not just to dream big dreams and envision what the future of the region should look like, but by working together to pass the legislation, create the public and the private sector investments, we're going to make it happen. Los Angeles is going to lead the way. Thank you all so very, very much.